For this video today, I'm going to ask that you put aside everything that you believe that you know about Jesus, whether you are watching this as a Christian or a Muslim or as an atheist, whoever and whatever you might be or affiliate yourself with. Let's just take everything that we know about Jesus and put it to the side for a second. And let's approach Jesus as a mystery, and let's approach this whole spiritual warfare as a mystery as well. What is spiritual warfare? A lot of the times people misunderstand what spiritual warfare is because they don't really necessarily understand what it's like to fight in the spirit and not in the flesh, and they don't understand what it means to test the spirit of people, because in the Bible it does also say that we need to test the spirits. But what exactly does that mean? It means that you have to really, in order to know other people and in order to know how other people are programmed, you have to know how you yourself are programmed. If you yourself are programmed in a specific way that is not leading to the outcome that you want, well, then there obviously must be something going on with how you are as a human being functioning as a human being if you're not getting the outcome that you want. So in this video today, also, we're going to be touching on a few heavy topics. Politically speaking, that is, which I don't like to talk about politics all too much, but for this video today, we're going to be touching on those subjects. So what I can say, and by the way, for those that are just joining, my name is Thaddeus, and this is the Regal Change YouTube channel. Welcome. I want to begin with a verse from Revelation 18:2, and it says, "And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great has fallen, is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird." It reminds me of the song "Wish You Were Here" by Pink Floyd. And the lyrics go something along the lines of, did you trade everything that you wanted to be for a cage? You know, did you trade everything and all your heroes to just be in a cage? And this is something that a lot of people in our day and age have done. They have traded their lives to be in a cage, and they've traded... It's a psychological cage, though. And something that Jesus says that is that he did not come to bring peace, but to bring a sword. Well, what does that mean exactly? It means that it's not an actual sword. It's a sword of truth, and it's a sword of discernment. It's a sword of understanding. And so many men and women nowadays are looking at the reality of the situation before us, not just in the game of life and our careers, but also, and in college or education, but also in family. For the first time in human history, we are valuing careers and status and all of these other materialistic things, openly declaring that it's more valuable than family or legacy or stability. And you, as someone that is, at least if you are watching this video and you're someone that is striving for emotional stability, you have something that almost 90% of the world does not have. Now, of course, this is not all of you that may be watching this video. You might be going through some things right now. You might be becoming that version of yourself that you want to be, but be that as it may, ultimately what we want to do is get you to be in that place, in that state of mind, because then you'll be able to make rational decisions and think about the long-term consequences of those decisions. So many people are so caught up in the day-to-day life that they do not have the emotional capacity to do, or the emotional competency to do what it takes, and to do what it takes specifically to raise a family, or to not be so concerned about their appearance. I've made this distinction in a couple videos recently, the distinction of image and appearance. This is where the image of Jesus is going to be more important than the appearance. Why is this the case? In Genesis 3 specifically, we see for the first time when the serpent, who was subtle than any other beast in the field that God had made, and when the serpent spoke unto the woman specifically, the woman was beguiled by the serpent, and the serpent convinced Eve that she should not surely die if she were to partake in the forbidden fruit. So basically what this is saying is that our focus as godly people, or people that are striving to be closer to God, needs to be on communicating with God and not with demons. So recognizing a demon when you see one is going to be very important. And I've also got a couple Bible verses here that I want to pull up here. But essentially, this is Ecclesiastes 9:18. It says, "Wisdom is better than the weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good." So much of what is good in the world can be destroyed. And Eve, in the story of Genesis, if we were to look at this story as a mythological representation of humanity, because what else would this story be? This is a story that is not even centuries, literally thousands and thousands of years old. And for some reason, to this day, we are still trying to figure out exactly what the story of Adam and Eve is all about. And this basically, what also the taking the forbidden fruit tells us, is that knowledge will not get rid of or erase your pain of spiritual awakening. You, as someone that spiritually awakens, will have to go through pain, but not necessarily physical pain all the time, even though that can be the case. It's going to be emotional pain. And so when people say that the spiritual journey is not for those that are not for the faint of heart, they're not lying in any way, shape, or form. Because basically what Jesus does, when you finally start to see what Jesus is really saying, you start to realize that, because, okay, before I get into that, why would God have to come down, or wherever he is, why would God have to be here and die for our sins? Think about this for a second. Why would God have to do that? Because ultimately what Jesus does is he shatters perceptions of reality. If you were to just look at the story of Jesus as a story, let's not even entertain, because I do follow Christ, but I'm speaking more broadly and hoping to get more of a practical, psychological understanding so that we can bridge the spiritual here. What exactly is this saying for humanity? Why does God need to die for humanity? Why? That doesn't really make sense at first glance, but then you start to realize that that's exactly the reason that he's there, is because it doesn't make sense. Jesus provides a foundation and a moral compass for humankind. And so many times in life, we not just in the story of Adam and Eve, because what happens in Adam and Eve in the story of Adam and Eve, after Eve gets beguiled by the serpent, Eve convinces Adam to take it, even though Adam knows that God told him that he was to lead the woman, because the woman is a part of him and his rib. And we can get into the symbology there, but it is woman that is a part of man. It is not man that is part of woman. And so that's a very big distinction to make in these mythological stories as well. And so, based off of what we understand about men and women, based off of and in regards to the story of Adam and Eve, what we are understanding, slowly but surely understanding, is that women want to, because of their curiosity, they want to erase the pain of suffering, and they also are easily impressionable. And the man, if he does not have the emotional capacity and the spiritual foundation to lead a woman, they're both going to be dragged into the knowledge of good and evil, and they're going to hide from God, at least attempt to do so, because that's what happens in the Adam and Eve story. They're going to hide from God because they know that they did wrong. Why else would they hide from God? Why else? So I have another verse here that I want to share. In Matthew 26:52 through 54, Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me over to the 12 legions of angels? But how then should the scriptures be fulfilled, that it must be so?" Now that's not the King James Version, but you guys get the point. The idea is that it's like the lions, right? The lions are whoever lives by the sword dies by the sword. Lions are a very good indicator of this. Lions live by the sword and they die by the sword. What this is saying is that it's one thing to arm yourself, because nowadays in the political climate, we talk a lot about the Second Amendment, we talk a lot about abortion, we talk a lot about being able to change genders and all of the letter people. But one thing that stands out in this scripture here is that we as people can make a choice to live by the destruction of our own lives that we create. We create our own destruction. This is exactly what happened in the story of Adam and Eve as well. Jesus was saying to us that we create the nature of our own life, and we create the peculiarity of our own situation. And if we do not take accountability or responsibility for it, well then, how is it going to be possible for us to move forward in a manner in which we do not feel the need to hide from God? When you are on the righteous path, there's no need to hide from God. So now let's steer more into spiritual warfare and what exactly spiritual warfare is. Let's give an example. Spiritual warfare, an example thereof, is any time that you're dealing with a tough situation, and it's not tough on you necessarily physically, but it's tough on you emotionally and spiritually. You you can't really understand what's going on. Maybe you're dealing with someone that is trying to confuse you, someone that is trying to manipulate you, someone that is trying to play head games or mind games with you. And something that you have to be aware of is that if you are in the situation and you end up wanting to hide from God in the situation, there's something that you did wrong that you know you did. There's something wrong that you are doing or have done, and you do not want to look at it because that would mean that you would be part of the problem. This is again what Jesus means when he says he brings not peace but a sword. It's also a sword within us. Sometimes we have to cut off parts of ourselves that are not worthy, per se, to be into the kingdom of heaven. And Jesus talks a lot about the kingdom of heaven and that we are to be like a child if we were to enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, why a child? Well, it's because what you're trying to do is not forget your childhood. You're trying to remember it and then expand on it. Because if you live a life in which you are trying to forget what happened in your childhood, you're not going to really know who you are. And so when God says you must be like a child, he says this and it has multiple meanings. It means that you are to be like a child, pure, innocent, curious. Eve's curiosity was not a hindrance until the devil showed up. Think about that for a second. What exactly is this saying? Is that it's that woman, I'm talking about woman as a whole, woman herself. Curiosity is a good trait to have. However, because of the emotional innocence of Eve, she was convinced by the devil to partake in something that God commanded her not to. So, and then she tried to take Adam down with her. And there's a verse in Proverbs. It's, I believe it's like Proverbs 5:3. I'm just thinking about it now. Where it says, yes, for the lips of a strange woman drop as a honeycomb, and her mouth is smoother than oil, but her end is bitter as a worm, sharp as a two-edged sword. We see this theme of swords again and again and again throughout the Bible. And a sword is something that is a symbology, or a symbolic, I'd rather say, figure. And we must understand that Jesus also says that if there's a mote in your eye and you try to take the mote out of somebody else's eye, make sure you have the mote out of your own eye first before you try to criticize anybody. And judgment is actually good. Jesus doesn't really say much about not judging. He's saying that you should love your enemies. He's saying that if somebody slaps you on the cheek, you should turn to the other side and give them another, let them go again. It's like, well, what the hell? Really though, what? Why would God say that? Why would God say that at all? It's like, well, you got to make sure that you learn what you're doing. You got to make sure why people are trying to take advantage of you. And it's not to say that you should let people take advantage of you. It's more like if somebody smacks you and you didn't see it coming, whether it's psychologically or spiritually, and this goes in line with spiritual warfare, it's like, well, you got to understand what exactly you did wrong and what exactly you're not defending properly. What kind of values or principles are being crossed that you're allowing to be crossed? Are you not standing up for yourself properly? This is something that you have to really ask yourself. And this is where accountability is going to be the only thing that saves you. So faith is, in some ways, challenging for a lot of people nowadays. And I think the reason being, most of the time, is due to the nature of our relationships. You know, men are sitting there thinking, you know, is this supposed to be my wife? Like, is this supposed to be a wifey woman? And then the women are sitting there thinking, you know, is this supposed to be a husband? Is this supposed to be my man? We've gotten to a point in our society where I think it's like we're all expecting so much from each other, and yet we don't have that trust and connection with one another. And so, just to shout out now to all of the men that are actually righteous, that are confident, that are intelligent, that are on their way with the heart of a lion to where they need to be, and to all of the women that are actually feminine and cooperative, that are in many ways beautiful, not just outside, but inside. It seems like these kinds of people are in short supply nowadays, more so than ever, and you can't always tell what kind of person someone is. So you must watch their actions. You absolutely must. And again, this comes back to Jesus saying he does not bring peace but a sword. You've got to have the discernment. You've got to have a keen eye in order to look out for these things. Because if you don't, it's going to be an issue down the line in a way that far, like, just severely negates your overall well-being as a whole. And that is something that we do not want here. So with that being said, I hope this message was useful and insightful. And may the grace of Jesus be with us all.